All right, Coach, whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
All right, thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it. Hello, I'm Eric Heyman. I'm head football coach at Olivet Nazarene, and I'm here to speak about ONU's football culture system, and I'm going to speak a little bit about culture in general, but just a few words about ONU, and so you can have a better idea of who we are. But we're an NEI school located in Bourbonnais, Illinois, just south of Chicago. We have an incredible campus and incredible education, about 3,000 students, 120 majors. It's a Christian school. And we took over this team about 6 years ago, a team that had 12 losing seasons in a row. And since then, we've had 6 winning seasons in a row. We finished the last 2 years 15-3, had an undefeated season, first in the program's history. And in a conference, and then earned our first berth to the national playoffs in over 20 years. And so it's just a good thing for us. And I'm excited to talk about the culture and the system that we used to get to that spot. And so if you have any seniors or any guys that you've coached that are interested in transferring, I know that's the big thing now, unfortunately, but it is what it is. We'd love to talk to them, and go ahead and get a hold of me. So I'd love to talk to any of your players out there. So anyway, I just think starting with my history, so you know, from a football perspective, the influences that I had, because the influence are going to speak super loud through this presentation. And so when I think about my influences and how we talked about, or how I got to learn about culture and just really how we practice what we do, it really has to do with these 3 guys here. And so Andy Lambert and Steve Wilt and Scotty Kessler, 2 of them were head coaches I worked for, just phenomenal men, and then really turned around 2 programs when I worked for those guys. I think we won conference championships at both of them and went from 1-9 in both of them to do that. Really programs that really aren't historically successful, but these guys really led them. Scotty was a mentor that just really shaped how I think from a philosophical perspective. And so those guys just were super influential to me and helped create a philosophy of coaching and teaching. And then it gave me some practical applications. Some other organizations that have been highly influential on me and how to shape and think about leadership and culture has been a company called Giant. I know that they have a subsidiary called Culture Wins. So I've been connected with them and trained by them. Focus 3, Tim Kite's organization, just listen to his podcasts and just looking at his materials have shaped how I think. And then 3D Institute has been a really good mentor for me from an organization perspective of learning some things I think are important. And then going back to Scotty, he has a website called scottykessler.com. I would encourage you to look. So my history as a coach is I've worked for 5 programs, 2 as an assistant, 3 as a head coach, I think for 27 years or so. Every program was really bad, not historically good. And we had the opportunity to turn 4 of those around, worst to best. And so a lot of experience in doing that. I'm actually had experience in one program where we didn't turn it around, and we learned a lot from that as well. And so, but it just created some clarity for me in how to implement a culture. I think that was just super important. When we turn around those programs, I think the 2 things that stood out are just that you have to have a great culture and work to do that. And then you have to acquire talent, whether it be staff or players. And so those are the 2 formulas that I think are super important when we're working on a culture. I think just had incredible experience as an assistant, as a head coach, in both winning and losing. And so I think that has been really a lot of the talk you're gonna be able to hear from those experiences tonight. So tonight I want to really talk about creating a systematic approach in culture. I want to ask and think about these questions for you. Why is culture important? How do you build? What does culture do? How do you build culture? What are some key components of a successful culture? And then what is a practical, what's it practically look like in your programs? And so when I do that, I think you'll have a better understanding of a systematic approach to culture. So the first question I think is, why culture? Why is culture important? It's such a buzzword. Everyone says culture, culture, culture. It's in business. It's in all organizations, but especially with football. And I just think culture is incredibly important. And so this is straight from Focus 3, Tim Kite. I just think he is really good at trying to frame why culture is important and what it's about, and then how do you do it. And So the first thing I think he talks about is the power of culture lies in three things. It lies in the idea and the ability to engage the hearts and minds of your players and your staff. It aligns focus and effort, and so guys are on the same page throughout the program. And then it really energizes the behaviors that win. And I think that really resonated with me. We had been doing it for a long time, but then when he had some words and some talks I listened to that really try to create a little bit more structure in what we were doing and what we believe to be true. So the power of culture, just real quick, to engage hearts and minds, align focus and effort, and to energize the behaviors that win. And so he also talks about how culture is built. It's not what you proclaim. It's not just a sign on the wall, but really it's what you practice, promote, and permit. And so it's just what you do on a daily basis. And so if you're just put a sign up there and it's not something that you're doing on a daily basis, it's just a sign, it's just a saying. It might just be a theme of the week or something. And so, but for us, we really want to practice our culture every day. We promote it every day, and then we try to incentivize the behaviors that win, and then not allow the things that, we do not want to permit the behaviors that hinder our culture. So I think that's some just really important things to think about right from Focus 3. You can go to their website and get some of that stuff, but I think it helps us really define our talk tonight. So I just, when I'm starting, I think you should ask yourself some questions before we get into this talk. What does your culture look like right now? What does your culture feel like? And then what does it act like? And so as you start to think about the things I'm talking about, maybe these questions will help you think about how to grow, improve, or just some different aspects of what you're doing. And so I think those are questions that I ask a lot, and I think it's good for us to think about it as we get going. The first thing I want to talk about is this idea of high-performing teams. And so I came across this research. It's from Professor Amy Edmondson from Harvard, and she did this huge longitudinal study that was a meta-analysis. So it had a bunch of studies put together, but it was longitudinal, 20-some years, I think, and then multiple entities and sectors. So it was some in business and some in sports and so forth. And they came up with this idea, and they asked this question, what creates successful teams? And the number one characteristic of high performance team was this idea called psychological safety. And, for a football coach, it seems kind of soft. It doesn't seem like something that's really important, but when you dig down into it, I think it's incredibly important. And so whether you're running a business or a sport. And so I think what is psychological safety? It means that the characteristics of psychological safety is this idea that team members value each other. They're productive in conflict. Failure is a learning opportunity. It's not fatal. There's social sensitivity of different people. There's empathy with the different people within the organization. And then there's obviously mutual respect. And so I think what it's not just being nice all the time. It's not having an organization with no expectations, and it's not agreeing with everyone. And it's also not one person doing all the talking. And so it was important for me to think about what is the thing that's going to put us in a situation to be in this high performance zone. And so, and it was psychological safety. And so when you have psychological safety and accountability, and they're both at high levels, that's where the teams function at the highest levels. And that's really another word for psychological safety is culture. And so when we have high performance learning zones in organizations, or even a football team with high levels of psychological safety and high levels of accountability, that's when you're going to maximize your performance. If you have high psychological safety but low accountability, then you're going to have anxiety zones. If you can look at this graph, and if you have low or high accountability and low psychological safety, then you're going to have apathy zones. And so we want to be in a spot where we're in the high performance zones at the highest levels, so that we can have the best opportunity for success. I think it matters the most because it gives you a competitive advantage. And so each coach, I'm sure at this clinic at different times, are going to be talking about inside zone or coverages or blitzes and things like that. And those are things that coaches, including us, spend a lot of time doing. But I think what we are also trying to do is find competitive advantages in all ways. And so I think team culture is absolutely an opportunity for us to create competitive advantage. That's why culture is so important. We also have there's a saying out there or a formula out there from it's called the Steiner model. And it says your actual production equals your potential production minus your faulty team process. And so if your culture is a faulty team process, then your actual production or performance is going to decrease. And so culture is important. And so we want to try to do everything we can to build it. And that's what you want to do. So when you boil it down, psychological safety, when it's high, and you're going to be at the high performance zone, and that's going to give you the competitive edge that you want. And I think that matters because we all are looking for the competitive advantage, and culture is a great way to do it. And that last thought I have on culture before we start talking about a culture system is that a culture is a greenhouse. And so it's either, plants are in a greenhouse are either growing or they're declining. And so if you're the gardener as a coach, then you are responsible for growing of that culture. And so there's, in any greenhouse, you need water, you need sunlight, you need plant food, all that type of stuff. And the same thing with the team. There's certain things you have to nourish the team to make sure that you're maximizing your growth. And so as a gardener and caretaker of your team, that's a lot of work. And but when it does grow, it's exactly what you want to be with that competitive advantage. And so leaders define culture. And so when if your team's a greenhouse, you're the gardener, and you're gonna define that greenhouse. Is it growing or is it declining? And as leaders, that's our responsibility to define and lead and drive that culture. And so a question for you is, are your athletes growing or you're declining in your team culture? And so if it's declining, then maybe that's results that you've had. We've been a part of programs that have had losing records when we start. And so, and just like a greenhouse, you might plant it, and it takes a long time for that plant to grow, but it's growing a little bit at a time. And so when we've turned around football programs, it's been like that. It's been sometimes 3 to 4 years, 5 years. Typically, if a team turns around quickly, they had a lot of talent, and they probably were not that far off from having a decent culture, and they were eager to have it. And so for our programs, they've been pretty bad, and so it's taken 3 to 4 years to get to a spot where you're really competing for that conference championship, and then the ability to win those. And for those teams that we've been a part of has been fantastic. And so anyway, that's the last thought of just what culture is about. Culture is a greenhouse. It's the atmosphere. What's your atmosphere like? Just some questions right there to ask. Is your athletes growing or are they declining within your team culture? And so I want to talk a little bit about system. And so I think the next part of the presentation is just going to be about what are some components that I think are important for a culture system. And we just don't, again, want to have signs. We want to have a systematic process that we can evaluate, so we can equip, empower, and evaluate our team from a culture perspective. I mean, we have a systematic approach to how we install. We have a systematic approach to how we recruit. We have a systematic approach to how we do a lot of things. And so I want to have a systematic approach to how we do culture as well. And so the first thing I think we want to talk about is foundations. All right, what is the foundations of your culture? And what we talk about is vision, mission, and values. And so I'm going to talk about these components of culture. Then I'm going to come back at the end and talk about what it looks like in our team specifically. But your vision, you have to have a vision, mission, values, and it has to be, again, it's not something that you just say. It has to be something that you lived. And so your vision is your preferred future. What is a vision for your program? When 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, what do you want the vision, the program to look like? And so what does the end look like? I think it's always good to start with the end and say, this is what we're going to be. And typically that's your vision. And so the second thing I think is important to talk about is your mission. It's what you do. It's the behaviors that you try to create, and it's going to be the results at the end of what you want to get out of it. And so what is your mission? It's what you're going to do. And then values is how you're going to do it. It's really, again, I think the big thing for the values, it's the behaviors that develop the mission. And so, but those are the three things I think are important from a foundational perspective: is what's your vision, your preferred future, what is your mission, what do you do, and in your values, how do you do it? as you think through those, I think you start the building blocks of the foundation of what you need to do to start to create successful programs. The second thing I think in a component of a culture system is people. All right, I think it's just super important. Your people are your best resource, and so relationships matter. Your relationships between your staff, administration, your relationships between your players, your relationships between your recruits, your parents group, whatever, it just all matters. And so how you treat people matters. And so in a relationship context, I think it has to be about others. It has to be about how you treat people. It has to be how you train people. It has to be about how you reward people. And so I remember sitting at a table when I was a young coach, and there's all these successful coaches. They had won national championships. Some have been All-Americans, and there's a lot of rings at that table. But at some point, none of them were talking about the rings or the championships or the wins. They were all talking about relational things. They were all talking about these memories and stories and names of people that made a huge difference in their life. And that really struck a chord with me, that it was about relationships. So a question I have for you is, how are the relationships on your staff? Is it dysfunctional, or is it functional? Is it thriving, just like that greenhouse? Is it growing, or what is it? And so what's the relationship between your players? How's that working? How's your relationship between your staff, administrative staff, and your bosses? How does that? And so I think that those are some really important things to think about when you're thinking about the components of a systematic approach to culture. Just going back a little bit too, with your vision is, with your vision, the question I would have is it clear and is it compelling? And so I think a clear and compelling vision is important to lead people somewhere. And so if it's something that's not very compelling, then I don't know why people would want to follow that. And so a vision is something that's pretty clear. Everyone on your team would know what it is, and then it's got to be compelling. They've got to be wanting to follow and go to that spot. And then I think about your mission, a question to think about: are you on task? And so each week, are you on task? Each semester, are you on task? Each season, are you on task? Each couple of years, are you on task with that mission? Are you continually going back and living out that mission? And then your values, to me, the values have been really important. You see the values actions the actions of the values out on a daily basis. And so when you walk through the locker room, or when you talk to the practice, when you walk through the weight room, if you went to the cafeteria, the values that you've stated, the values that you are trying to live, the behaviors that you're trying to create, you see them working on a daily basis. And so I think that has been a really, really big thing for me to think about as I've developed programs and try to be in programs where we're trying to make these successful. So going back, we have the people here. The next thing after people, the next component I thought about that's important is your language. And so I'm not talking about custom and things like that. I'm talking about just words in general. So when you're creating any type of culture, language matters, right? And so if you go to a foreign culture and you don't know their language, then you're just not going to be able to react or function at a high level. And so words matter. And so what we try to do a lot is define words, and so that the words mean the same thing to the same people, maybe at different places and different times. And so it just brings operational and organizational clarity. So words matter. When everyone's using the same words, it just brings about, and they mean the same thing, it brings about organizational efficiency and clarity. And that's just really important. And not just words, we try to be very image driven. And so, images have the power of 1,000 words. And so we want to be image driven. I think that matters because when you're talking to the team and you have images or words that paint these pictures, whether it be some kind of a culture, thought, or saying or phrase, then there's applied learning. And so it's instant. And so, with Tim Kite, he talks about BCD, blame, complain, defend. Everyone knows what that means right away. Or if you said you're above the line, or you're above the line when you're late to a meeting or a class, they would say I'm below the line. So it just is functional learning right now. It's applied at instant. There's no way that somebody could say they don't understand what you're saying. And so I just think that, so if you have words and image that are images, and the images are things that you're trying to create from a behavior perspective, and it creates an opportunity for applied learning that's instant and sticky. I think you want your words to be sticky. We use want to know all the time. Everyone on our team knows what want to know means. It's that you got to win the moment. And so you got to be in the moment. It means that you're going to be in the process. So it has a definition of a moment, being in the present, and then it has a definition of being in the process. And so we're process oriented, but the thing that matters the most is in the moment. And so we say want to know all the time. And it's definitely something that is applied, it's instant, and it creates efficiency and unity in our talk. Does your team speak the same language? And so are you on the same page when we talk about relentless effort? This is what it means to you, or how to get over a mistake, or this is what execution means to you, or whatever word or whatever behavior you're trying to create. Do you have a word that aligns with that, where people, or a picture that aligns with that allows you to understand exactly what you're trying to mean and what you're trying to do every day? So also the thing about languages, we put it everywhere. I mean, I think most coaches do this anyway, but it's everywhere on shirts, walls, slides, social media, everywhere we want to communicate something, it's there. And it brings, again, organizational clarity, and it helps develop your culture. Another component of small group or of culture is small groups. And so we have about 136 players on our team this August. And I still try to break the teams into the smallest common denominators. And so I don't think for us positions are just enough. We try to have another group where they're broken down, so we create some cross-pollination within our teams. But the reason why we want to do that is because we want to build the deepest roots that we possibly can within our structure. And so the reason research would say this, that if you're just a team that coaches are getting up in front and speaking, like if I just got up and did all our meetings as 136 people, that's all we did, then it would be really great at consistency. It would be great at inspiration, and it would be great at being efficient. If you look at this slide here, so if we broke it down into groups of 13 to 70, then that's called more of a training phrase. And so maybe that's what you do in your offense and defense, where you're doing an install. And so it's focus, connection, and prospecting. All right, and that's from a business perspective. But then when you break it down even more to 4 to 12 people, now you're starting to think about position groups. All right, then you start to get your coaching, you start to get depth, collaboration, and accountability. And then even if you broke it down in the groups of 3, which is hard to do, maybe I would do that with captains, things like that. Then you have apprenticeship, which is capacity, scalability, and influence. We try to live as much as we can in coaching. All right, so we try to live in this phase of depth, collaboration, and accountability. And so it's the greatest opportunity to me to build trust. And you have the reason why is you have people that it creates more intimacy and more collaboration in conversations about goals, about things that we want guys to be held accountable for. So it creates a higher level of personal responsibility. I mean, if you think about even Jesus's model, right? He had 12 disciples, and you think if he was going to go impact the world, he would be in a spot where he would do mass stadium events and things like that. That's not what he did. He picked 12 people, and those people, there's Christians all over the world because of 12 people. And so small groups matter. So what we try to do is create small groups so that we have intentional multiplication of the things of our culture. And we do that by depth, collaboration, and accountability in the smallest of groups. Another thing that I think hit me in when we were trying to create think about developing culture is this idea of the U.S. military did a huge study on why do soldiers fight. And so it was interesting because people would think, well, they fight because they hate communism, or they hate terrorism, or they're super patriotic. And there's probably truth in all that. But the number one reason why soldiers fought was because of the brotherhood, the power of the group, the small unit, the unit. And that's another reason. It wasn't even the power of the brigade or the battalion, which is the bigger group. It was the power of the unit. And so, which is, groups of 10 to 12 and things like that. So I think that is important. It's where the smaller group has the opportunity to build the largest bonds, and then those bonds will intertwine within the groups. And so it creates the opportunity to develop the most trust. And I think that that's the number one thing of building a great culture is that guys trust each other and eventually they love each other. And so that's just my thoughts on small groups. And I think it should be a really big component of a culture system. Leadership, it's super important. Obviously, in any successful organization, leaders drive the cultures. And so I think it's important. Leaders are more than just a few individuals. It just can't be the head coach. It just can't be a couple of the coaches and a couple of the seniors. I think what you try to do within an organization to create a culture that is going to be robust is the first thing is you just really try to get the best leadership to at the grassroots level. And so as a head coach, I'm going to be in meetings, I'm going to be at the practice, I'm going to be in the weight room here and there, but there's so much part of the day that I'm not going to be there. And so, but a player that has really developed in leadership is going to be in all the places that the coaches don't go. And when you have a grassroots leader in those situations, then that are reflecting the values, the mission, the vision, and the values of the team, then that's how you create an incredible culture. And it is really, I think it's the backbone of the culture. So the first thing I think you want to do in leadership is you want to have guys lead themselves well. All right. And so each guy has an apostle, I think was it Charles Barkley said he's not a role model, I think, or maybe even a leader, but I think that everyone's a leader and everyone has the opportunity to do it. And the first thing I think you have to do is you lead yourself. And so you have to model it first. And then at some point leaders have to speak. I heard Tom Allen in Indiana was talking, and he said, it's not just about walking it, you got to talk it too. And I agree with that. I think we put so much emphasis on walking, which is the most important thing for sure. But at some point, a guy's going to have to speak up and say, this is who we are. Who we are. This behavior is good. This behavior is not good. And I think that is important. And I think it's super hard with the youth of the day that to speak truth and love. I really think that's a hard thing, but you want to model that. Then I think you want to develop your staff and your players in general. You want to equip them to be good leaders. You want to empower them with responsibilities and roles and ownership. And then you want to evaluate them. And so it's like the 3 E's. And so equip, empower, and evaluate so that they are a high level of leadership. I always say you want to really make sure that your critical core is on the team is the highest levels of leaders. And so when the best players are the best leaders, you're going to have your best teams. And so we want to try to develop that critical core of your best players to be the best leaders. And I don't know, I have a number for you, but I know that if it becomes, 30, 40, 50 of a 100-man team, then you're going to be really going places and changing. I think the success on the field is going to be evident based on that critical core, developing that critical core. And so I think the thing you train is ownership. I think you give them roles, you give them responsibilities. They own their own 20 square feet, and they're going to own more. They're going to own their position. They're going to own their class. They're going to own the leadership in maybe the offense or the defense, and eventually you're a captain. You're going to own the leadership of the whole team. And so I think that's something that is super important when you develop culture. So how's the leadership on your team? How are you developing it? How's that process going? Hopefully it's going great. The next thing I think about a component of culture is process. And so I think one of our core values is make it better. And so when I think about process, I think about two different things. I think about this idea of long-term over short-term. I just think about turning around a program or turning over a culture is long-term. I think about just developing a person is long-term. I had a mentor that said it takes 50 years to make a man. And so it's a 50-year process. And so, but to make a football team, a football player, maybe it's a 4-year process. That's what we get. With COVID, we might get 5 or 6 now. So, but it's really a long-term over short-term process. It's really hard to do in our profession because it's so quick. I mean, you see coaches getting fired in 2 to 3 years, but in the general, I just think this is a principle that I'm going to stand on. It's always about the long-term over short-term. The other thing I think we talk about with the process is just the idea of a little bit of growth each day. And so we always talk about this idea. The word picture for us is 1% each day. If you go 1% each day, then you're definitely moving forward. And it's some point, a week or 2 weeks, you may not notice it. A month, you may not notice it. Maybe 3 months, you may not notice it. But after a year, after 2 years, 3 years, you see some substantial growth. So we just like the idea and of the power of tiny gains. I think that is a big deal for us. And so we talk about this idea of a growth mindset. And so opportunities, any obstacle that we have, whether it be a loss, you're down on the depth chart, it could be anything, is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to have that growth mindset and to grow. And so these are just some charts and word pictures or graphs that we use to train our team and our culture. So the power of tiny gains. So 1% better, that's the substantial, you can see on that slide where the growth index you're going to have. The aggregation of marginal gains, there's a 1% improvement versus 1% decline. It's just great word pictures that help us really emphasize the convictions that we have of it's about the process. The other thing about the process, I think it's just you have to have processes. And so I think you have to have a systematic approach to what you do. This has been really helpful for me. So we have a staff manual. So every year I go over the staff manual, and before early camp, we're going to go over it every year. And so I think we reiterate the things that mean the most at the beginning of the time. When I hire a new guy, it's an easy process to train. We have a recruiting manual here, so we know how we want to recruit. We know how we want to train guys when they come in new. We know how we want to call. We want to know how we speak the language that we speak to recruiting. And so these are just two examples of having a process-oriented culture as well. And so we have a discipline process. We have a team manual as well, all that type of stuff. And then what I think that does is it creates another opportunity to create clarity and organization, and then repeatable deals. So if I have one coach leave, we can go with the staff manual or the recruiting manual, and we get to the same training right away. So we're doing the same things over and over again. So we do some other things too as far as the process. We have a thing called in strength conditioning called 17s, and so we get up in the morning, we go and we run these 17s. It's a certain amount of distance, and you have to make it in 17 seconds. We do it every year. It's repeatable. It teaches the mental and physical toughness that we want. It's a process in our program to get us the foundation that we want to get to the strength program that we want to be for our spring ball, and then also as we get into the season. And so I have a discipline process. And so every time I take a guy into a discipline meeting, I have a process that I go through so that they know I'm consistent, and then also it gets to the behavioral issues. And so that's another thing that we do. So anyway, I think that you have to have a process. And then here, I think another component of this culture is goals and incentives. And so and evaluations. And so what are your goals in different areas? What are you aiming for? If you're not aiming for anything, you're probably not going to hit what you want. And so as you set a goal, I think it could be the program goal. All right. So that this is what we're going to do this year, or this is what we're going to do in 4 years, this year, this game. And so you have different types of goals. And so you're always trying to aim and hit that. And then, I think we have our players do individual goals. So who do you want to be in 40 years? Then how you're going to be at the end of 4 years is going to impact that 40. And then, once we get to keep breaking it down to what are you doing this week to accomplish that long-term goal? And so I think that that's important to think about and process and bring it down. So we have long-term goals, we have short-term goals. We try to begin with the end and the long-term goals, and then the short-term goals are just weekly measurements of if we're heading in the right compass. Are we heading straight north, or are we off a little bit, and how can we make that adjustments? We have big time goals. We have heroic goals, what we call who says we can't goals, things that we're going to try to do things that people maybe say we can't, maybe even at some point we would say we can't. When we took over the program, we had some heroic goals, and we're starting to accomplish those in our 5th and 6th years. Pretty awesome. And then I think most of you guys know SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So that brings it back down to the weekly and the short term of what we're trying to accomplish. Incentives and evaluations, we really try to reward behavior. So it could be an acknowledgement, it could be an increased role, and it could be stuff. We could give up hats or shirts or whatever. And so the incentives that the behaviors that we want, the behaviors that win, we incentivize. All right, and I'll go over that in a little bit. And then we try to evaluate everything. So we do end of the season evaluations, so both personal and personnel, system evaluations. We do culture evaluations. I give the opportunity for the players to come in and meet with me, and they can speak their mind end of the year, so they have input and ownership. But we typically do end of the season, end of the year, and then obviously the weekly evaluations of our play and practice, practice evaluations, game day evaluations. So we're doing a ton of evaluations to make sure we're staying course and have clarity of where the direction that we're moving in. So that's kind of just this idea of what I think is important to create a culture system. You know, just to review that, it would be things. You have to have a foundation, vision, mission, values. All right, you have to. It has to have a people component that is people, or you're treating people great and you're training people. All right, it has to. Your language matters. I think that's important in your components. Components of a systematic approach to culture, because it brings clarity in your vernacular. And so if the same words, one word means the same thing to everybody in your program at different times in different places, that's a good thing. All right. I think you have to continue to break big groups down to small groups to create intentional multiplication. I think that's where you have the most transparency and accountability depth. I think you have to think about how you train and develop leaders. I think that's important, that you equip and empower and evaluate those leaders on your team. I think you have to have built-in processes so that creates consistency, efficiency throughout your program. And then I think you have to have goals, incentives, and evaluations. And then you just keep following those things to get to the spot where you want. And there's always adjustments, and there's always things that you have to do to get to the spot where you want to go. And so this is an inside look at what we do, some of our best practices, I think. Here's our vision. It's 98+2. So we talk about words matter. It's on our helmet. People will know that in 1998, the Olivet football team was a national runner-up. So we said we want to be better than that team. Our first meeting, they hadn't had a winning season in 12 years. And so we're getting closer and closer. 98+2 equals 100%. So we're just committed to that 100%. So mission, our mission is just to develop people. If we say 4 years forever, we want the programs, our development of you is going to impact you for the rest of your life. And so that's what we talk about. Our values, talk about honoring God, loving your brothers, telling the truth, making it better, competing in heroic goals. And it's in our locker room. It's what we do. We define it. Love brothers is fighting for each other's highest good. Tell the truth is know yourself to lead yourself. So it's leadership. Make it better is don't be good, be better. So it's a process of getting better. Compete is close the gap between your potential and your performance. And your heroic goals is who says we can't? Two people say you can't, yourself and others. And so we won't listen to those people. All right, we're going to tell ourselves what we're going to do, and then we're not going to listen to others. And so that's just that's our foundational component of our vision, mission, values. I go to the values every day. It is a litmus test for me and our behaviors of how we are living out our program daily. And it's been an amazing tool for me to use to get clarity and cooperation and efficiency within our program. All right, family. So this is our people. We talk about family all the time. We even spell family uniquely. So it's big F-A-M, so our capital F-A-M, little I, capital L-Y. So it's always about the team. It's never about me. And so anytime you hear our guys are start to say, hey, well, that's a big I. That's a big I situation here, right? So I know that we're in a good spot when they're communicating. They see something going on in the field or practice. It's a big I, means that it's a selfish behavior. And when they're self-correcting. And so family is big for us. You see it everywhere. People that come and are around us see it and experience it. And that's really, really important to us. And so our second core value is love your brothers. And so guys are really loving their brothers. I mean, guys openly say, hey, I love you. And our coaches say, hey, I love you. And our players are saying that, and they're living it out. And so how we do that is we support each other. First, you have to support each other before about 3 to 1. They say you have to have 3 to 5 encouragements before you have 1 critique. All right, and so we try to build them up, and then it creates trust and environment where we can then we can have the critical spot that we tell the truth, right? And so support and challenge go hand in hand in our family, and that goes back to that, because we've built that psychological safety. And so we're in a high performing zone. Guys feel comfortable for us to tell the truth because they know we care. And so that's because we're a family and we treat it like a family. So Just here's some tools that we use to communicate family, some tools that we relationship. I'm not going to go over this. If you want more information, I'm not going to go in detail. If you want more information, you can feel free to call me or reach out to me. But when we think about people, we want to be a liberator, not a protector, abdicator, dominant. So this is a pictures and words that mean a lot. If we want to have influence, then our character, our chemistry, our competency, and our credibility matter. So we talk about the 4 C's. It builds trust. So once it has the 4 C's, then we're in a spot where we're going to have a really good family because we have trust. That's the number one factor of a family, great family members. We trust each other, and then we move towards love, which is the depth. All right. We talk about being interested versus interesting. It's not about me. It's a boomerang, right? A picture of a boomerang. So I want to be interested in my teammates more than I'm interested in telling them about my Letterman jacket and all that stuff. And so same thing in recruiting, same thing down the hall when we walk and talk to the other coaches at other teams down the hallway here. And then we just already talked about the high performance zone. So these are just some tools that we use to do. These tools help us do the heavy lifting in our communication of culture. And then also when we come into conflict with that, it also is a great mirror for people to say, hey, where are you at on this spectrum? Are you a liberator, dominant, protector? And then they're going to be able to see the truth for themselves. So when we recruit, we talk about fit. I mean, that's the biggest thing we're looking for, because I think that one of the ways from a college program to build culture is recruited in. And so we'll give our own special touches and development on it. But if I can find the most common DNA, then that's a really good thing. And so that includes coaches when I hire, includes players, and that's going to help us build the culture. And so when we talk about the people aspect of our culture, so here's what you're going to see in our program. You're going to see the offices filled with players. Outside of just we're not talking about football. We do a lot of that too, but you're going to see guys in our offices. You're going to see guys in our homes. You're going to see our meetings aren't just football. We'll have stuff like our receivers coach always does 3 things. And so he starts every meeting with 3 things. And so like, what are the 3 best candy bars? What are the 3 best cars, 3 best movies? So every meeting they're thinking of, they're doing something not football, then they get to football. So that they're connecting, and then they're seeking competency. So they're building chemistry, then they're getting competency for football when we start watching film. And then we do that in the meetings, and we do that in the practice and the games. We're just really trying to be super relational. Freshmen, so how do we build our people, and what's a freshman going through it? So the first thing is we invite them to our spring ball via Zoom, and or if they can show up so they can be a part of the install meetings. And so they're getting connected right away. We bring them in the summer and do just a little mini camp where they we teach them practice. We teach them to do a lot of team builders. Our school has an orientation anyway, and so we teach them that so that we can we teach them how we practice our behaviors, our culture, so they can start to get connected. We bring them in a little bit earlier too, before early camp, and do the same thing. And then they're part of our core groups as soon as they, sometime in the spring, not even before they get here in the fall, so people can get acclimated and connected to their teammates quicker. And it just has been a big deal for our freshmen. Our freshmen feel like they're part of the team right away. And that's a big deal when we go compete, especially when those guys are playing. As a team, we do retreats. This is us on Lake Michigan. The coach is talking here. I already talked about core groups. It's really important. It meets once a week. And we have core group leaders. We do team builders. It could be bowling, could be all types of stuff we do. There's a lot of stuff we do within a practice that might be just little things. All right, Mike, the strength coach might do like a thumb wrestle thing. I mean, just kind of, interesting stuff. We do a circle up before practice. So everyone circles up, and then they're all hand to hand, and they're going to talk about something that day. So maybe a goal that day, or they might do a prayer. They might do something where they're focusing on each other before they focus in on practice. And then we do an afterglow after every practice, and we do after every game where we call our brothers up. So we do put-ups, and we try to call up the guys that have gone 1-0, the guys that stand tall, and the guys that are just doing what we want them to do. So it's just a affirmation and a confirmation of things that we see within practice. So language. So we talk about language. This is just stuff. I mean, we're a gold. Our whole theme is gold standard. So it's our best, team's best all the time. So to do that, you have to create gold habits. Others are 1-0, 9, 8 + 2. I use Tim Kite stuff, Focus 3, but we talk about put up, stand tall, total release, family, tell the truth. Those are things like Tell the Truth Mondays, or every Monday we come to after a game, we're going to tell the truth. And so we just want to be honest with each other in our good and our bad. And so those are just words and language that we use on a day-to-day basis to try to create the culture that we're looking for. There's our core values. I went over that. So honor God, love your brothers, tell the truth, make it better, compete. Guys know it. So when we do a senior share at the end of the year, senior spotlight, so we ask each guy on the team to say what core value does the senior best represent, and so say, hey, love your brother, and so we'll go over why he loves his brother. So it's just a part of the beginning of our process with the core groups and the freshmen. It's a part of our end of the our program when we're sending guys off, and we're giving them a ceremonial send off to go do great things. And so leadership. So from a leadership perspective, so just things to think about. What we do is how I hire, train leaders. I'm looking for guys that fit our culture, right? We put our players in leadership positions. We train all our players at some point to model how to model leadership, how to influence people. And then in our core groups, we teach them how to lead small groups. And so all our leaders I had 18 core group leaders on this team, 2 per core group. And so I have an old guy and a young guy. So old guy is apprenticing the young guy. And so, because we vote on team core group leaders, and it could be in any class. I don't care what class they are. If they have influence, we let them be in it. So I'd always put a upperclassman with the underclassmen to apprentice them in our core group, so that there's a connection. All right. And so leadership retreats, I take the core group leaders and the captains to a leadership retreat each summer. And then I meet with those guys once a week. And so we go over player welfare. We go over different ideas of what would help best grow the program, develop the program. We talk about discipline or certain situations that we want their input. And then I always do something to train them. And so, it could be a 30-minute to an hour meeting, depending on the time of the year. So we do that once a week. All right. So goals. So we have them set career goals, season goals, and weekly goals. All right. And so the career goals are the long term, and then we try to align the weekly to get to that spot so that they can do it. Then we set academic, athletic, leadership, and spiritual goals. And then we try to evaluate those goals by yourself and have personal responsibility and then group accountability. So we evaluate the goals, each guy individually evaluates the goals. We bring those goals to the core group so the players can hold each other accountable, and then the position coach is involved in those goals as well. So that's how we do goals. The core group, or the small groups, we do the position group. Everyone has a position group, obviously, but then the core group is, I think, a next step for us because it creates a cross-pollination. So I have seniors and freshmen. I have different offense and defense, which is important to me because we're a team. We're not an offense and a defense. We're a team. And so they get to know a lot more people than just your position. When I played, I always thought, man, I didn't have, when you would have certain guys that are on a team, but then when you're probably going to be I was a defensive guy, so it'd be my D lineman and maybe a couple other players, and that's probably who we hung out with, but you didn't hang out with a lot of other guys on the team. And this way you get to know a lot of other guys, and then you might have 5 or 6 guys in different positions going to a movie. That's a big deal off the field. So that's our small groups. Those small groups meet once a week. The strength program, I think, is important. It's really it's just one of the best laboratories for you to be intentional, strategic, and creating your culture. We have an incredible strength coach and Coach Peterson, and so he just emphasizes and reiterates, and even he just does a great job of building the thing, using our words, being intentional, and developing the culture that we know we want to create. And it's amazing. It's the strength coach for us is really the second head coach, and so he's going to have as much touch to anybody, and so he reinforced that culture. It's a culture lab, and that strength program is super important for us. I think the same thing with football. So just be intentional and strategic in how you are trying to use your culture to develop a good schematic components to your games, and who you want to be from a schematic team. And so one thing I think about is just positional clarity. And so we want guys that have expectations in those positions, and then we want the grades posted, and so that everyone knows where they stand, and so we can tell the truth. That's a core value, and we teach them to tell the truth. And if he has a bad grade, it's a growth mindset. So it's not that you're a sneaky player. It means that your technique or your fundamentals or your things our effort is not holding to our standard. And so here's 3 ways to get to that spot. And so it's a great opportunity for us to create positional clarity and growth within our culture. And then we do incentives. And so we're a gold standard theme. It's our branding, I guess. That's what we do. And so we have the gold mine. And so it's very, very difficult to accomplish at the highest levels. But so the gold mine is the 4 areas of it. So football, it's academics, leadership, character, spiritual. So those are the things that we want to measure. And we point it out for guys that get into a certain levels of what we want them to be. And then their awards, the gold standard awards, this is what we did a couple of years ago. The guy that had the highest could get Jordans. We had one guy get that. So it was set super high as our quarterback, which was great. That's when we went undefeated in our conference. And then if you get so many points, you get a hoodie. If you get so many points, you get a coach's top, hat, whatever. And so we incentivize it. And so not just there's some incentivize of leadership roles. There's incentives of stuff. So guys love that. And it's been awesome for us. We also have what we call the gold refiner. Again, we're theme and word. So gold standard, gold mine, gold refined. So when guys when their behaviors are alarming and they don't reach to our standards, that we have opportunities for them to refine themselves. And we take them into, it could be early morning. There's a strike policy, first, second, third strike, and on certain situations that we would get them and maybe some accountability guys involved in some early morning workouts. All right, we call them triple tears. So there are some reinforcements from a negative perspective to help get this train to a spot, the kind of burnout, a refiner burns out so that the purity can be. And so that's not we don't have a lot of rules, but we want behaviors, and those behaviors, it's amazing the better we get as our program grows, there's so few gold refiners. It's pretty amazing how that works. And so that's what we do to try to incentivize the program. So just in closing here, I just wanted to share, man, just, think about your culture as a system, not just a sign. And so when you do that, then you'll be very intentional and strategic, and you'll be able to have a direction, a compass to get you where you need to go. I think the idea that the number one characteristic of successful teams is the psychological safety or great culture. And so just let's try to work to be intentional and strategic. I think it's going to have an incredible payout. And if there's anything that I can do for you, if you'd want to follow up, please feel free to reach out. I hope you have this is my number right here. So my email and my number, and I'm gonna put a plug in for my wife. She runs a company called Highline Leadership. She works with businesses and organizations. She's been around football for 20 years, and she does a lot of culture and leadership development, and she's really great at it. And so if you're interested in somebody to come to your department, your team, maybe your athletic staff, then I would highly encourage reaching out to Liz at this number, and she would be able to help you out in any way. Feel free to call me. There's my number and there's my email. But man, I hope you have a great off season here, and I hope you have a great Christmas season here. And I just hope you have continue to work hard to have a great culture system so that you can have the results that you want. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.
Well, thank you so much, Coach. I believe that wraps it up. We're about out of time too. So on behalf of the Illinois High School Football Coaches Association, we just wanted to thank you for sharing your time and this awesome stuff about culture. It's been great.
Thanks for having me. Loved it. And I appreciate you, Matthew.
All right. Have a good night.